Tiffany, welcome to Diaspora Food Stories. How are you?
I am fantastic. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Oh, absolutely. We've been following your journey for a long time, as you know. And so it's just great to continue to watch how you're just thriving and all that you're doing. So thank you for joining us today.
It's my
So
pleasure.
you are joining us from Texas, Texas girl, and you've always been proud of your Southern Texas roots. Tell us, for the readers or for the listeners actually out there, tell us a little bit of your story in terms of where you grew up and where food came into play.
Yeah, so I always tell people that if you want to understand who I am and how I cook and how I think, you'd have to understand how I grew up. And my family is very important to me. My grandmother had 11 children, and all of them learned to cook. All of them are very good cooks at that. And she raised everyone in Baton Rouge, well, technically Port Allen, Louisiana. So
Okay.
most of my knowledge of food and how we cook is from Louisiana. Eventually, as everyone was much older, they moved to Texas, Beaumont, Texas, which is where I grew up for the most part, between Louisiana and Beaumont. And I started at IHOP when I was 15. I walked into the kitchen and I told them I wanted to be a cook, and they told me no women were allowed in their kitchen. And I
Mm.
just said, "Oh, well, what do you have available?" And they said, "You can be a server." And I said, "Okay, I'll take it." Not really knowing dynamics of the world enough, being that my family is so large. I have 50 cousins, I have 53 to be honest. But
Wow.
so like most of my childhood was around my family. And we got together a lot. In fact, if it was one of those where if someone else is at work, then you have another person at house, you're going to auntie, uncle, somebody's house, you're meeting with your cousins, you're playing basketball with them. Those were the ways that I grew up. So there was a lot that I didn't really fully grasp until, I was 15 years old and 16 and started hanging with people outside of my family.
Now,
So,
who was that
yeah.
one that you zoomed in on that was sort of teaching you the culinary ropes as you were growing up? That now that you look back,
Say that one more time for me.
who was the person teaching you those culinary ropes
Oh,
specifically? If you had to name one person, mom,
yeah.
grandma, dad.
I mean, I think it was a combination of my mom and my grandmother,
Okay.
because my mom worked as well full time. She actually does hair, and she was always gone early. So my brother and I, we were the last two of my six others. We're a bit of a blended family, so there was eight of us total. But so she was gone early, so we would either get ourselves together, and she cooked. My mother cooked a lot. But my grandmother cooked for everyone. So it would be that moment of like going to your grandmother's house. She has like meals ready for you after school, full on rice, gravy, greens, beans. Like it's a full meal in some kind of container. And you would just go and get it either out of the freezer, pop it in the microwave, and you would have a full meal. So, or it was on the stove. But both my mother and my grandmother really, really gave me the basics and the foundation of how I cook. And then from there, obviously, travel and study and culinary school and all of those just added on.
Wow. So 15 IHOP, and we're going to come back later to some of the work that you do around social justice. Like if someone told someone today, no women in the kitchen, it'd be a totally different story. But we'll come back
Absolutely.
to that. But what was the turning point, or was there always that trajectory for you to say, you know what, I'm going to continue pursuing a career in culinary?
Well, I mean, this is the only career that I've known.
Okay.
So from 15, I've never gotten out of the culinary industry. I've been in different, areas of the industry, from sous chef, obviously started as a cook, ended up managing at IHOP actually when they needed me. But there have been moments where, I've taught at the Art Institute of Dallas, while running their restaurant class as well, which was a full restaurant for patrons. And then now to the ownership side of it. But at the end of the day, you still do some of the same things you did when you were starting off. I still spend days on the line cooking. I still spend some time in the dish station. Like, it's no different, really.
Wow, wow. And I remember when I came to Dallas and I was at Private Social and you were on the line. I said, I just want to say hi to her. And there you were, just in the midst of doing what you need to do to get it done, right?
Yes, yes.
Now, when you were starting off in your career, was it, I just want to be a chef, cook at a restaurant, I want to own my own restaurant? I mean, did you envision television and teaching and all of this amazing things that you're doing today? What was that vision back then, and how it's grown now?
So I'll tell you this. When I started at IHOP, I said, after working there and after managing, I said I want 3 IHOPs. I wanted to own my own from the age of 16 years old. So the answer would be absolutely. I've always thought of being in a position to where I control what happens. I've always wanted ownership. I've always wanted to have my own restaurant. I remember the days in culinary school and everyone's trying to figure out what they want to do, or do they want to be actually in a restaurant. And I'm like, I want to own a restaurant. I want to own a restaurant. And then that vision grew to I want to own multiple of restaurants. And I did feel like that I would do something with TV. When I was younger, I did a lot of acting, and my parents just knew that I was not going to go in this direction. It went from like acting and sports to eventually kitchen. And so they're like, wait a minute, which one are you going to do? So I believed that something would happen. And I always loved the idea of having my own show as well.
Wow, wow.
But I've always been a dreamer. So I dream. I mean, I sleep at night and I dream. Like, when people say they don't remember their dreams, I'm like, I remember, whether it was in the middle of the restaurant and everything seems to be going crazy, or I am thinking of a next concept or what we're going to do, or how it might be magnificent, So there's a lot of things that are happening in my head. I tell people, stay out of there. You'll get lost.
Wow. Now, being in the industry so long and just seeing where we are today, right? Where there's just this wonderful explosion of Black chefs just really doing their thing, claiming culture, claiming ingredients, all of this. When you were coming up, what was representation like? And was that, I don't see too many, although that didn't deter you, right? But was there that question of where are the Black chefs? Where are Black women like myself? Professionally, did that ever come up throughout your career?
Every restaurant that I worked in until, even at IHOP, we did have some other brothers in the morning, but like there was definitely no other women. There were very rare you'd see another woman in the kitchen with me. And it was even more rare to see a Black woman. I think in my life, I might have worked with one when I was like on the line. And they always try to put us in like garde and pantry or pastries and things like that. And I was very interested in the hotline. And so I just really didn't see them. So I didn't think that Black people were doing food or running restaurants. I would see people doing catering or personal chefs and things like that. But the restaurants I worked in, I didn't see, heck, I didn't even see a woman running it. And for me, I think that was enough push to make me go, okay, well, I'll do it. Like, I'll be that one. And I know that there are people who don't have that same reaction, right? It's like you can see that there is no one that looks like you in that position and just think that it's just not possible. My makeup is a little bit different. It's like, well, it may not be right now, but I can do it. If they can do it, I can do it. And so that's just always been kind of how I've been. But yeah, I didn't really see many, and I didn't know that there were so many others until I got much older. Right now, probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe, is the most I've ever seen and got to know so many other Black chefs in the business. Like, we all have the same story. And it's crazy because the more you talk to and meet different people, everyone was going through the same thing and we all didn't know each other, right? Like, how awesome would it have been to be able to say, hey, Gregory Collier, okay, what's going on out there? How you dealing with this? How you dealing with the people who, aren't listening to you. Tavell Bristol Joseph, like what's happening in your world? Like, you know, Kenny Gilbert, can you tell me how to navigate this path?
Right.
I mean, there's just
Mhm.
so many. I mean, even Kwame and everyone else who's been on this journey, we've all been separated. And we're now at a place where, one, we're no longer waiting for things to happen for us. We're making it happen for ourselves,
Absolutely.
creating festivals, events, learning opportunities for ourselves. And I think that is the difference, because if we wait for someone else to do it for us, it will never happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Top Chef, how did that opportunity come about?
I was cooking in a restaurant. I was executive chef of a restaurant called Go Fish, seafood restaurant here in Dallas, Texas. And I was in the middle of lunch. And I have a rule that when we're serving and we have guests, I don't do phone calls. So if someone calls for me, tell them I'll call them back. The maitre
Mhm.
d' comes up and she's like, "Hey, someone's on the phone." And I'm like, "Okay, well, tell them I'll call them back." She's like,
Mhm.
"No, like it's Top Chef." I'm like, "Sure." It's Top Chef. Yeah, I go,
Right.
okay. I mean, at this point, I've done no TV really, right? And so she's like, "No, please say again." So I get the phone and I'm like, "Hello," because I think it's somebody playing a prank or something. And she's like, "This is Magical Elves production of Top Chef. We'd love to have a conversation with you. We love to have you on. Can you meet with us?" And I was like, I think, but I initially said no, because I told him I don't like drama. I told him I
Okay.
don't really live with people in houses. Like, I try to live the most uncomplicated life there is, because there's enough going on in the world. And so they were like, "Well, you could win $125,000." And I was
Ooh,
like, "Sign me up, where I go."
okay. Wow. So how was that experience? And I believe that is the season that Kevin Sabraga won, I
Yes,
believe, correct? He was the first
yes,
African
season 7.
American male to win.
It was a first. Fantastic. Kevin is a really good friend of mine. In fact, he lives in Dallas now. He just moved to
Okay.
Dallas not too
From
long
from
ago.
from East Coast to okay.
Yes, his family is here now, so he wanted to be close to his family. Um, Being on Top Chef was life changing in many ways, and I don't mean just in status. I mean, it's very rare as a chef that you get put in a situation where you are around incredible people who approach food differently.
Mm,
Let's say I work in an Italian restaurant, right? Well, I only really learned that style of Italian, that chef's vision. The people around us probably cook very similar, because we've all learned from this person and this is the way it happens. Being on a show like Top Chef, you are around people from all over the world who cook very differently from how you cook, who've had very different life experiences than you. So you're almost being put in this boot camp, where you are forced to produce on the highest level. Like, your
mm,
brain has never worked at the speed that you have to create for Top Chef. And not to mention, there's all of the extra elements, right, of TV and judgment and criticism and things.
mhm,
And in many ways, it can make you stronger, or it can have you have low self-esteem about yourself and who you are and the food that you do. And
mm,
so there was a point where I had to realize that just because they don't agree that this dish is deemed the best, or
mhm.
just because they don't understand the dish, doesn't mean that my dish is less than. So no
Right.
matter what the outlook was, I had to stay motivated. And then
Nice.
once you stay motivated and you show that self-esteem within the food and that confidence through the food, it comes out. And then they have to like agree with you. So
Right.
it's a rocky road of emotions of, one day you're crying, one day you're on top, next day you're on the bottom, the next day you barely made it. So many different
Wow.
emotions. Yeah.
Wow. So have you always felt that you could truly represent yourself on a plate? And what I mean by that is I've talked to so many chefs who felt that they had to do what the judges were used to or what the standard the industry was used to as being the standard. So when you throw in some infusion of your southern roots, of your Ghanaian roots or whatever roots it is, if they're like, to your point, they don't know what it is, doesn't mean that it's any less than, but you're trying to live up to that standard, but you're not able to truly put yourself on a plate, if that makes sense. So have you always felt that, you know what, I'm going to go in here and represent who I am no matter what? I'm not going to cook the standard. I'm going to cook who I am and see what happens.
No, I didn't feel that way all over.
Okay.
From the beginning, I felt like I was you go from being a student and no one really tells you when you're when it's time, right? Like when it's time for you to fully show up. And I say that because when you're in culinary school, they pretty much tell you forget what you know. You know
Mhm.
nothing. I'm going to teach you, right? And you start learning how technically how you do things, the French technique in this. And, even in culinary school, I remember feeling like Southern food was less than, right? That was the food
Mm.
you cooked at home. That was
Mhm.
home food. If you really wanted to be, if you wanted to be a top tier chef, you had to cook French. You had to cook Italian. You had
It's
everything
trained,
else.
right?
Like
Have it
everything
by
else
that
was
title. Yep.
better. And so you almost kind of shield that part of yourself and you hold that for family or how you do at home. And then to get to that point where you feel comfortable to put it on a plate and comfortable for everyone else to truly receive it and have and hold it in high regard and value it and not
Mhm.
feel that it should be, less than in money as well. Those are all different issues. Those are all the things going through your head. And I'll tell you, I don't even doing Top Chef, I wasn't fully, I was 25 when I started, right? Like I was young in that moment. I was there was one more girl, Tamisha, she was 24, I think at the time. So I was one of the youngest on the episode on that season.
Mhm.
And probably going into season 8 as well, the youngest. And that story wasn't really told, but that's okay because
Mhm.
I
Go
never
girl.
acted as if I was young. I had a lot of growing to do. I had a lot of maturing. I had a lot of things I needed to do within myself in the industry and understanding what is a story that I want to tell? Who am I on a plate? Like I didn't know that. What I knew was how to cook. And I
Mhm.
knew how to get great flavor. And I knew how to do the things that I had learned throughout my years, right? But when I opened Private Social, it was the first time I put fried chicken on a menu.
Oh,
That
wow.
was 10 years ago. I've been cooking, for a long time before that.
Mhm.
And so, like right now, Root Southern Table is the most free that I've ever been in my career
Wow.
and the most focused that I've ever been in telling the stories that I want to tell and feeling comfortable with whether you get it, don't get it, like
Right.
it, don't like it, agree, disagree. Doesn't really matter. It's my story. And
Absolutely.
a lot of people have come and they're loving it and it was a journey to get there and you feel almost like nervous, right? Scared. You feel
Mhm.
anxiety when you put all of that because you don't know how they will receive it. Obviously, it's a business, so you need to make money.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
you don't know. And then to have them just love it. And
Right.
for New York Times, Wall Street Journal, James Beard, the double nominated, it felt good to be, in that place to say, okay, what I'm doing matters. My food, my culture, my stories, like they matter. So very